Hello friends, welcome to this lecture of computer organization. In this lecture, I am going to discuss more about on the microprocessor architecture. So let us discuss first some of the basic terms that are used in microprocessor. The first term that is basically considered in a microprocessor is number one, bit of processor. So how we can define the bit of a processor? Bit of a processor is basically implies the number of bits of instruction processed, or you can say scanned, or you can say read by processor. Very important. So the number of bits of instructions that are basically processed or fetched by a processor at a time is known as a bit of processor. So when we say that a processor is of 8-bit, it simply means that it can process or fetch 8-bit of instruction at a time. Similarly, if it is 16-bit, it simply means that the processor is able to process or fetch 16-bit of instruction at a time. And when we say that 32-bit or 64-bit, it simply means that it is able to process or fetch 32-bit or 16-bit, 64-bit of instruction at a particular time. So this is the important term that you have to keep in mind, because sometimes it is asked during viva or interview. The second thing is speed of processor. So when we say speed of processor, it simply implies the time of execution of CPU. So what is basically the time of execution of CPU? It is basically the time of execution of instruction made by the processor. At this moment, you have to simply remember that when we say time or speed of processor, we simply consider it as the execution time of CPU. And when we say execution time of CPU, it has a formula that of instruction count into cycle per instruction and clock cycle of processor. So this entire formula determines the execution time of CPU. So what basically these things, you can simply understand that in a given formula you would be provided that what is the percentage of the instruction present to be processed by a processor. And cycle per instruction simply means that how many clock cycle is basically taken by processor to process a given instruction, and clock cycle simply determines that amount of time to transfer the clock pulses during the transition from high pulses to high pulse. It is the time taken by the processor to transfer the pulses while making the transition from high level to the high level of and from lower level to the lower level of transition. So we will talk about in details of the execution time of CPU in one of our lecture, but do remember this formula because this is basically asked during Viva interview. Let us move to the next segment of microprocessor series, that is what are the important information that we have to remember about microprocessor. The microprocessor that we consider in our entire lecture would be the 8085 microprocessor. And when we say 8085 microprocessor, what is important that you have to know about 8085 microprocessor? Let us discuss that. So 8085 microprocessor is the series that we have to work on. And when we say 8085 microprocessor, it is made up of 8080 microprocessor along with two of the very important instructions. One is the RIM, that is read interrupt mask. Read interrupt mask. And second thing is single interrupt mask. The more one of the important read interrupt marks and single interrupt marks are the terms that we make use in our one of the lecture. But at this moment, you have to simply remember these three things, that 8085 microprocessor is basically made up of these three things. One is it is a constituent of 8080 microprocessor along with the RIM and the SIM instructions. So that is an important point about 8085 microprocessor. Moving on, what are the other points that we have to remember about 8085 microprocessor? Number one, it is basically the 40-pin IC. It is 40-pin IC, that is, it is a 40-pin integrated circuit. It has 40 pins that basically work on to perform different operation. Out of this 40 pin, we have ground at pin number 20, and we have VCC, that is, we have VC, basically the power supply provided at pin number 40. And these 40 pins are categorized into 6 kind of pins. So these 40 pins are basically categorized into 6 types. Number 1, address pin. Number 2, data pin. Number 3, control and frequency pin. Control and frequency pin. Sorry, it is basically control and status pin. Then frequency and supply pin. then single instruction transfer pin, and finally externally initiated pin. So these are the 6 categories of pins that we have in 8085 microprocessor. Let us talk about the basic architecture of 8085 microprocessor in our coming lecture.